with it. Let me restart.
All right, lads and lasses, and good day, mates. Welcome to another episode of the Two Under podcast. If you caught the start there, yes, we are having some little technical difficulties with Mark and his video. He's just smiled, so every now and again it'll actually move. He is here. We can hear him, but his video is absolutely stuffed by the looks of things. But look, Mark, we've got a few things to get through today. Just going to dive straight in. We're going to start off with the news that everyone is aware of right now, as it was announced a couple of days ago. Thomas Tuchel has taken or has been offered and accepted the job of England. Eddie Howe is safe. I think probably most of the fan base will be very happy about that news. Your immediate reaction to that news?
So the UK media is reacted as expected.
Yeah,
I personally don't give a crap if he wins something for England and we get another star on the shirt for winning a World Cup. Who cares if it's got a little asterisk next to it? It's still got a star on the shirt. As far as I'm concerned, he's a good manager. Everyone's going on about, we want an England manager. We want an English manager. Like, it has to be an English manager. It's like, well, who else is out there? I had someone on social media pull me up because I suggested that no English manager has actually won anything, and there's no major honours out there for anyone. Apparently, English football started before the Premier League, so thank you for that. That little snippet of wonder. But as I said to you guys, I'm not sure what he's wanting us to do, other than dig up one of the old guard and sort of put Cloughie back on and weekend at Bernie's it. I think I was saying, get him out. It's like it'll be interesting. But look, for me, I think Tuchel is actually a really good manager. I think he was a bit hard done by at Chelsea. My biggest thing, though, and I'm pretty sure that every Newcastle fan out there will feeling the same, the fact that it's not Eddie Howe and it's finally just been dealt with, and that sort of cloud and that sort of monster hanging over our shoulder all the time is now gone, and we can just get on with the most important stuff, and that is Newcastle United.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you about this, because I was listening to the Rest is Football podcast, Gary Lineker, Alan Shearer, Big Beaks, and they were talking about this as it was actually kind of unfolding, really. And one of the Big Al, he had some insider information. So first of all, he said that Thomas is not going to take the job until the 1st of January, which panned out to be correct, with Lee Carsley taking over for the remaining few League Nation games this year. But he also said that, and this is what something I want to kind of ask you about. He said that Eddie Howe wasn't on the list of 10 managers. I think it was something like 10 managers that the FA had, the short list. Eddie Howe was not on that list. And Big Al was kind of dumbfounded a little bit by this. He couldn't believe that they hadn't put what many would say was the leading English candidate for this job on their list. Now, before I ask you about this, I'll get your opinion rather. To me, if you say, I'm not interested in that job, I'm interested in keeping the job I've got, I'm focused on working for Newcastle United, I want to win things here, I'm too young, all the things that Eddie Howe came out with, and he's a wily character. He treads the line, he knows how to play the media, he says the right things, it doesn't give too much away. But if you come out and say those sort of things, and then the people who are prospectively going to offer you a job go, all right, well, we'll just go ask other people. Is it a great surprise that you weren't on their list at the end of the day?
Not at all. Not at all. That's the whole point, isn't it? I know as fans, as long as that's still hanging over our heads and in the background, is well, are they going to come and approach him? Is he actually just playing at coy? And does he actually want the job? Will he take the job if he's offered it? As long as the fans, we're obviously concerned. We know that he's, as you said, he's probably the leading English candidate out there at the moment. He's probably the most qualified in terms of modern managers that's still kind of in the game. But realistically, if he's distanced himself from it and the FA is just gone, well, you know what, you're probably too expensive anyway, you don't really want it, we're not going to waste our time with you, we're going to go and interview some people who are actually potentially interested in the job, then what are you expecting?
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. So that was just the first thing I thought of.
Yeah.
From someone like Big Al, you'd think, isn't it obvious why they didn't put him on the list? But anyway, Eddie's just had his presser shortly before we came on, and he was asked about this incessantly. I think probably at least 50, 60% of the questions in this entire presser was like, England, 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 England. And he did a good job. He sort of, batted it all away. But one thing that was interesting is that, remember when he was out of work for that year, and he was going over to Simeone in Spain, and he was observing how he was doing his things. Well, it turns out he also went down to Chelsea for a couple of days and watched how Thomas Tuchel did his sort of stuff at Chelsea. And he was obviously very impressed with the things that he did. He said he's a good bloke, and he's wished him well. And I feel like we can probably now bury this for a little while. The contract for Thomas is, as I understand it, 18 months. So that'll take him through to the next World Cup. But I feel a little bit like, that's given the FA the chance to sort of kick the can down the road with regards to Eddie Howe. It's like, okay, well, let's get in an outstanding candidate that is available right now. Okay, he's German, but whatever, he's a great manager. Let's get him in. Let's see what he does. If he fails at the World Cup, like tragically, really badly, we're not on the hook to keep him for any longer. If he does great, he's already ours. We can probably do that extension quite easily. In the meantime, Eddie Howe might go to absolute tits and do nothing with Newcastle. Hopefully that's not the case, but it could be. So I feel like, they give himself a little bit of breathing space, if you like, to sort of like just see how it goes over the next competition, major competition, see how the German guy goes, and maybe we'll come back to Eddie Howe if the environment's right. You know what I mean?
I think so. I think the pressure is probably mounting on Howe a little bit. I think we've heard through, like social media posts and what have you, that the owners have effectively set European qualification this season as a bare minimum. Doesn't matter what European competition there is, but we definitely need to qualify for Europe, which I don't think, given the investment and beyond the last transfer window shabacle. But look, if I'm honest with you, it's probably Eddie Howe has probably 12 months left to prove that he is the right man to take us forward. I think he needs to kind of get that next step in Newcastle.
You reckon?
I genuinely think that if we go backwards a little bit more, last season, I think we can ride off to injuries, to hectic schedule. We were in the Champions League for the first time, but now we're kind of in that, well, we don't have any of that, and we've still had a pretty mediocre start to the season. The football's not been great. There's a certain number of players that are below par. We're starting to get players back now. We've started to have a bench for the first time in a while. And Eddie Howe's kind of getting to that point now where I feel he needs to start and get us back on the right track. And if he doesn't do that, then I think the pressure will start to mount on him. Well, it's not from me. It's not from you. It's not from like the sensible people out there, but the pressure will mount if there is any kind of slip up. And I think if we don't qualify for Europe this season, I think the pressure will probably mount to a certain point where it probably won't be out of the realms of possibility if we end up going for someone else.
It's amazing,
if the owners, and it's stupid, but it's the way of football. My feeling is if we do that, then the FA's, as you said, they've kicked the can down the road. They've put a manager in charge who, it's a free hit. You may win something, you may not. If he doesn't win anything, the media will crucify him, and then it'll be an easy sayonara, get him out. And if he does, then maybe someone else is in charge. I genuinely want to know who the other 10 candidates were.
That's something I haven't even considered, but God knows who they were.
Steve Bruce.
Oh God, no. But yeah, anyway, let's bury this talk of England. We can ignore it for the next 18 months.
God for that.
And we can get down to some more joyous news, which is the fact that Louis Miley is officially back in training. He's been spotted on the grass. He's kicking balls. Probably won't be in contention for this game at the weekend against Brighton. It's going to come a little bit too early by the sounds of things. And the same can be said actually for Wilson. He is not quite yet on the training pitch, but he's edging back towards fitness, probably just to break down 5 minutes later, no doubt. But with Wilson, actually, he's not due apparently until, you're not going to see him on the training pitch until I think Eddie Howe said after
2026
next international. or maybe he was talking about Botman. I forget which one he was talking about there. But
Yeah.
as for Lewis Miley, excellent to see him back. He's been out for best part of a year with that injury that he picked up. I think the question everyone's asking really is, how the hell do we fit him in the team?
I mean, there's one thing for sure. He's not going to walk straight back in. But if you look at our midfield, because we lost Anderson, we've kind of struggled to keep Willock fit. Longstaff's, in and out of the team at the moment. Tonali's kind of just back finding his form, although by all accounts his international form is absolutely first rate and deserves to get a start again. Bruno's not been in great form. Joe Linton's not been in great form. And we're pretty short on the ground after that. So just to have another body back that we can pick from, another player that we've got on the bench where if things are not going right, well, we've at least got somebody to call on to change it up. Maybe we want to add an extra player in midfield. Maybe we just want to substitute and add Joe Linton to the left or something. Who knows? But it gives us options. And that's probably the one. I know we complain about the forward line and the right wing and all that sort of stuff, but we're actually pretty thin on the ground in that midfield area outside of those 3-4 players that are kind of like the shoe-ins for those positions. So for me, he fits on that bench. It's probably something that he should have been doing last season had it not been for injuries. He shouldn't have played anywhere near the amount of minutes he did for us last season anyway at his age and his sort of stage of development. So, get him back on the bench, get him some cameo appearances off the bench, get him 20, 30 minutes in games, keep his development going. Interestingly, he looks like someone was saying, he's pushing 6'5", 6'6" now. Apparently, he's had a bit of a growth spurt. He's going to be a monster in that midfield if he keeps going.
What do you call him? BLM.
BLM, yeah, Big Lewis Miley. Yeah.
At least we don't have to hear about him being 17 every frigging 5 minutes.
Big Lewis matters.
But yeah, it would be nice to see him back. Apparently, according to Eddie Howe, he hasn't missed a beat. He looks like he's been there the whole time. So that bodes well. That bodes well. He can fit straight back in and look like he's not being out, which is wonderful. In continuing good news, Eddie Howe confirmed that Isak is back. He is back. He's available for selection. I think we can all probably expect him to start in that case because it's not like we've got a lot of options right now.
No.
First of all, I'll ask you about your opinion on that, but also the fact that they still are negotiating his new contract. From what I've read, what I've heard, apparently he is looking at that around 200,000 quid a week mark, whether it's exactly that or a little bit less, a little bit more, who knows. And apparently he's looking to insert a release clause similar to the likes of the one that Bruno had. Your thought on those two things?
Great for him to be willing to sign a new deal for us. If he left, he'd be at any of the top clubs. He'd be earning massive amounts of money. So, these are the figures that we have to start to deal with if we want to keep these sorts of players. It's the one thing that I've always been worried about because, yes, we may have owners that will shell out a bit of transfer money. Yes, we've spent well in the market. We've paid big money for players. But to me, the one thing that always stood out was in the PSR world and the FFP and, taking into account earnings versus salaries and turnover and all that sort of stuff, we still can't compete with the big boys. And that means we can't offer the top salaries that Man United will offer a human fidget spinner. And that is now we're talking about Isak, who is probably our best player on his day. And if not that, he would probably walk into most sides in the world. It's disappointing to have to sort of go through this again, but he is that important to us. We need to get him signed up. If we could, I'd be reluctant to lose him for 120 million or something, but I understand why these players are putting the contracts in. They obviously want to stay, but they're wanting to protect themselves as well. They're top draw players. They don't want to be stuck in a club that ends up going backwards because the owners decide that, oh, well, you know what, I've had enough of this. It hasn't worked out. We're going to pull the plug and we're not going to invest anymore. And now suddenly they're on a 6-year contract and they've got no escape clause and the best years of their career are behind them while we're playing relegation battles and what have you. So I don't think it'll ever get to that. Don't get me wrong. I think the owners are looking committed. They're obviously doing the right things to try and build the club up, not just in the short term, but for the long term. They're revolutionizing the academy and all that sort of stuff. But I totally understand in this day and age, players are wanting to play at the top level. And if we're not going to give that to them, and other clubs will, and they're willing to pay that amount of money to release them from their contract, I don't blame them in a certain aspect. I think if we get to that point where we've got that money to spend and we benefit from this, from other clubs not qualifying for Champions League and stuff like that, we'll be over the moon with it. So you can't have it both ways. It would be devastating to lose any of these players, but I totally get why they're putting those clauses in. Just get him signed up, so at least we get a lot of money if he does end up leaving. We can reinvest it.
Absolutely. We're not quite the same without Isak in the team. Longy was on the recent Restless Football. I seem to listen to that one quite a lot, by the seems of things. He was on the most recent one just today or yesterday it was, and he was saying that, in his opinion, Isak and Botman are the two real world-class players in the team, and the fact that we've got one, let alone two, is extraordinary. And then when you consider you've got Bruno as well, who already is obviously a full Brazilian international, Joe Linton's not that far behind him, and one or two others. You need to do what you need to do to keep these guys. And the problem is, of course, that for a long time we've had this salary ceiling, and I think the problem that they're trying to negotiate is that as soon as you go through that ceiling for one player, you open up the Pandora's box for all the other players. And
it becomes this arms race of like, well, we've kept Bruno, we've paid him 150 grand. Now Gordon wants a new contract. He wants at least that. Now Isak wants a contract. Well, I'm the center forward. I'm like one of the best in the world, apparently. Surely I should be on more than them. No, I totally get that. Yeah, it's something that was always going to happen. I think we had to be realistic about that.
It must be a huge can of worms and an absolute ball to try and negotiate that sort of thing. I'm glad I'm going to do it, but fingers crossed we can keep him tied down for a little while. Gordon still hasn't signed his contract by all accounts, so hopefully
I thought he'd signed it. I thought he'd already signed it.
No, but we did hear. Well, if he has, I haven't heard it. I could be wrong on that, but we did hear that Big Dan Burn has renewed for next season, so we have him for another season, which is wonderful. He's been pretty good.
That is actually really good underrepresented news, because I think he has been probably one of our best defenders this season. He's one of those players that constantly gets slated, never gets the praise he deserves. And I think he's actually been a really, really good player for us in that defense. I think Fabian Schär is a more shiny, showy kind of defender. But I actually think he's been the worst defender out of the two of them this season so far in terms of their defensive duties.
And you've got to bear in mind, most of the time Dan Burn's out of bloody position as well. So he's doing a terrific job. Yep. All right, let's move on from that news. I will just quickly cover that 6 of our 10 games over the December and January period have been selected for TV.
Massive. We're massive, us.
Massive. Thankfully, I believe only one of those 6 have ended up being on a different day. So it's really just like either time changes or just the fact that they're getting picked up. So hopefully that's good news for all the traveling fans. And the other bit of left field news here, Isak Hayden, he has switched his international allegiances, if that's even correct. I guess I don't think he's ever played for England.
I'm not sure he's played for England, has he? So
no, so he's decided to go and play for Jamaica, where the lesser spotted Mason Greenwood plies his trade these days, and who I believe are managed by ex-Newcastle manager Steve McClaren. So he's getting quite the band together there, isn't he? I mean, to be honest with you, I wish all the best to Hayden. I thought he was an absolutely terrific midfielder on his day. He was committed. He had all those kind of homesick troubles with his family, and he just sort of said, right, fuck it, I'm going to get my head down, I'm going to get on with it. And I wish him all the best. He's been brilliant. He's still at Newcastle. I actually almost forgot he was still on our books. But
he signed like an 8-year contract or something, didn't he?
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Michael fucking Ashley. Let's not go into that bloody whopper. But anyway, he's full of heart. Still our player. I wish him all the best. He's been absolutely fantastic.
100%.
And a model pro, I think.
Yeah, no, he's been a great pro for us, and he could have easily threw his toys out the pram, demanded his move, but he didn't. Stuck, as you said, got his head down and just worked hard and never came about. But fair play to him. He's done well. He's done well for us.
Absolute model pro. Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck to him. So let's move on to the main point of this whole podcast, which is the Brighton preview, which is Old-fashioned, as Newcastle, as NUFC.com always call it, an old-fashioned 3 p.m. kickoff on a Saturday, which makes it a midnight kickoff for us on Saturday night here in Queensland. Not too shabby, Mark. We have drawn against Everton in our last game, 0-0, that absolutely dire 0-0 game. Brighton won their game 3-2. I believe they came from 2-0 down to win that one at the Amex. So that was a hell of a turnaround. In all the competitions, Newcastle have won 5 against Brighton. Brighton have won 7. There's been 7 draws. Let's have a quick look at the table. I've got a few more stats to get through, but just interesting to look at the table so far. Brighton under a new manager, of course, who is like a child compared to how old I am. Newcastle in 7th on 12 points with 1 goal difference, and Brighton are in 6th with also 12 points, but with 3 goal difference. Both teams not doing too bad in the first sort of 10 games of the season, are they?
I think they've had a couple of games where they've had a few hiccups. I think they've played well in some games. They've gotten results that, have been a bit out of expectation. They've lost points where they probably should have won. It's been like, from what I understand, it's been a bit of a mixed bag for them, but they're up there again. It's like they have been for the last few seasons. They are a well-run outfit that has a lot of stability behind the scenes. Interestingly, that they are one of the top clubs to have loans, potentially interest-free loans from their owner. So it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out. And it's a little bit disappointing from us because of the whole, we had to sell Minteh to them, and we've got no debt, but they've got loads of debt. That's all sort of like signed off on by their owner. So a little bit sour grapes there from me, I guess. But Minteh is going to be, he's played okay for them, but he's been in fits and starts. But I think they've had a good start to the season. I don't think we've had a very good start to the season in terms of how we've played, and we're all level on points. So, things can probably only get better for us, hopefully. And that they're probably where they would normally be.
Yeah, they are that sort of team that kind of bobs around sort of top 8, kind of 12, 13. Don't know, that's sort of
they're like that top team for the next league in the league.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But I think that's a lot to do with their style, which is kind of a little bit gung-ho, and they can get hit on the break. We'll probably touch on that in a little bit. We've not lost in our last 3 Premier League games against Brighton, winning 2 of them, but Brighton have lost just 2 of the last 14 against Newcastle, winning 5. We are winless in the last 3 Premier League games, lost 1, drawn 2, but one of those draws was against City, so not too bad. But I've only lost 1 in the last 8, and at home we are unbeaten in the last 11, winning 6. So Brighton, they do like to score goals, but they also like to concede as well. In the last 3 games, they've conceded 8, which is 1 more than the previous 8 games altogether. So they have that tendency, as we've just said there, they bomb forward a little bit. Well, not necessarily bomb. They control the game. They control the midfield. They pass it around, left, right, back, forward. So, they kind of frustrate you a little bit, try and move you around. But they do have that tendency to have that high line. And a little bit like Spurs, you can kind of just ball over the top. You can sometimes do a quick break down the sides or through the middle or whatever and find yourself behind them. So it'll be interesting to see how Newcastle's home record in particular does against Brighton's pretty good record against us, actually, in fairness. I'm just going to bring up some of the stats that we've been going through this season for both the teams. So Newcastle have scored 8 goals this season. Brighton have scored 13. We've conceded 7 to their 10. They've had a lot more shots than us, and therefore a few more shots on target, and obviously a lot of shots off target as well. And I've blocked a number more than we have as well. But what I thought was more interesting about this is the passing accuracy. So this stat here, assuming it's correct, of course, the passing accuracy of Newcastle so far this season has been 82.61% to Brighton's 85.75%. So, you're talking about 3%, give it under 3%. For a Newcastle team that I constantly seem to be complaining about how shite we are passing the ball, like from 1 foot away, kind of spooning it in the wrong direction or whatever. That's incredible, isn't it? That's an amazing stat, given how
I've looked at that stat in the last couple of games, I will admit, and I was very shocked at how high our passing percentage actually was.
I can't
And I
believe it.
think what it is we constantly give the ball away, but it's because we're getting caught in possession. We're not actually misplacing the passes all that often. It's that we're basically taking too long on the ball, and the opposition's literally tackling us and getting the ball off us. So it's that. Well, we're giving the ball away, we're losing possession loads, but we're not actually misplacing passes all that much. And I actually think that there's a few of those passes that are going misplaced. It's because we're trying to thread the needle and try to playing that perfect ball through, and like those Hollywood passes. Fabian Schär's probably responsible for 5% of that, like misplaced
Yeah, he was
passes.
terrible last game, wasn't he? Yeah, he was
Yeah.
absolutely awful. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the decision making has been absolutely lifting sometimes this season. You know, sometimes it looks like we haven't even played together. You know, the ball's too far forward, too far behind to the side when he wants it the other direction. But, you know, we focus on Newcastle, but every time I watch other teams, I see the same kind of similar patterns for the most part. Every now and again, there'll be something like that, but it feels a little bit like when it's Newcastle, it's like every friggin' other pass, it's like, oh, that was terrible, lads, what you doing? Let's have a look at the lineup that you're predicting for this. So as we mentioned, Isak should be available for selection, but we haven't heard that until really late before we came onto this podcast. So this lineup here was done on the proviso that Isak wasn't going to be available. Now we know that he is. Why don't you talk us through it and tell us how you'll change this to accommodate Isak?
I think the easy one is to take Gordon out of the centre forward and put Isak up front, and then probably put Gordon on the right instead of Murphy. Even though, look, if it was me, if it was me, I have a bugbear about Harvey Barnes starting games, and that is because he always plays really well when he comes off the bench and struggles when he starts games. And I'm sorry, he scores some brilliant goals and he's always effective when he's coming on late. And so it's hard to leave him out of that squad when he's playing that well. When he is coming on, you kind of got to give him that chance. But when he does get the starts, he never, ever performs as well as he does off the bench. And I think he's one of those players that really benefits from a bit of extra space late on in games where he can run at tired defense. So to me, if Isak's fit, I would personally put Gordon back on the left because I think that's where he's most effective. You don't want to take one of your best players out of position to accommodate someone else. I actually like Murphy on the right. I think he can be effective out there. We've seen Miggy play pretty well in a couple of his games that he has played, so maybe it's a decision over those two. Play Isak up front. Personally, I think Howe has a track. He's got a track record of playing. Putting players coming back from injury on the bench. It all depends on how much training Isak's had. If he's been raring in training, then it's going to be hard to justify leaving him out. If he has just kind of come back and proven his fitness, maybe he'll put him on the bench and bring him on late. Who knows? But yeah, if Isak's not fit to start, then that's the side I would go with. If not, then I'd put Barnes back on the bench. I'd probably put Miggy on the right and then stick Gordon back left, stick Isak up front. The rest of the team kind of picks itself at the moment.
So it's interesting to say that about Miggy on the right there, because I was going to ask you if the thought of a high line, the Brighton high line against our pacey wingers might sort of tilt your thinking on how you might do that. But obviously Miggy's got bags of pace.
Yeah.
Barnes is not slow. Gordon's not slow either. Murphy's not that slow either, to be honest with you. They've all got a fair bit of pace. I suppose you could probably, pick any number of those players. But yeah, I imagine.
The only thing that I would say is how fit Willock is. I think the running and the power that you get from Willock coming from that midfield role, that raises a bit of a concern on whether or not you end up putting Joe Linton on the left and Gordon up front. It's nice to have these options now, and it's something we haven't had for at least 12 months. So it's nice to kind of have some options and we can change things around. And I think one of the big things, as I said earlier in the show, if we don't capture the form back and we do struggle and we miss out on Europe, and Eddie Howe is not utilizing his bench properly and not rotating players, I think that's going to be one of the big criticisms of him. Now that we have players available, he's going to have to show that he can rotate players effectively, because going forward, one of the big things, if we're going to qualify for Europe very often, we have to maintain that rotational policy to keep players fresh and use that squad depth that we will build up over time.
And with the likes of Miley coming back, as we've already mentioned, that kind of gives him another feather in his cap to say, oh, well, I can rotate these teams now. And I was just thinking there as well, Willock is kind of a bit like the way you described Barnes there. I think he's much more effective when he comes on as a sub than when he starts as well. And I don't know if it's because he does a lot of the running, same as Barnes, lots and lots of running, not so much reward as it tends to pan out, gets knackered. And then, that spark that you rely on from those kind of players is kind of, burned out a little bit, Okay, well, I'll just read out this team so for anybody who's listening knows what the hell we're talking about. So you've got Hall at left, you've got Byrne and Shaw in the middle, Tino on the right. Kieran Trippier has done his hammy, so it's apparently not as bad as, but he'll be out for weeks. So yeah, Tino will probably get a bit of a run now, I think. Then you've got Joe, Tonali, and Bruno in the middle. We did have Barnes on the left, Murphy on the right, and Gordon up top. But as we've just discussed, that is likely to change with the fact that Isak has come back into the team, and not a minute too bloody soon, frankly. Just to touch on Brighton a little bit here then. So we don't have their lineup. We don't know what the hell they're going to do. But if we can talk about some of the individuals. Danny Welbeck, for example, seems to be finding a little bit of form right now. He's got really 4 goals in 7 games. Mitoma is starting to look like that very tricky, dangerous player that he wasn't quite last season, but he's looking like he's getting back to his absolute best this season, and he is an absolute wily character. He's going to be very difficult to mark. And also, of course, Dan Burn is facing his old team. I kind of forget that now. It hasn't even been that long when you think about it, but I think Dan Burn, I think Newcastle, and I kind of forget it's Brighton where he came from under that kind of amazing deal that we managed to pull, because he was homesick and all the rest of it. His last chance to play for the Toon. But let's talk about the guy who we hoped we would see having a debut at St. James's Park in the black and white stripes, but unfortunately he's going to be doing it, if he plays, in the blue and white stripes of Brighton. It is, of course, Yankuba Minteh. 7 appearances, 1 goal, 1 assist. He's only had 15% goal involvement. He started 71% of the time. He's had 65% of the minutes. Not amazing stats, I'll be honest.
No.
Not amazing. And every time he does something great, everyone goes, oh, Murphy's shit. Should have kept fucking Minteh. And then when he does nothing, there's just crickets.
Yeah. It's always that way. The deal that happened and the way it happened was always going to leave a sour taste in most of the fans' mouths, including ours. The fact that we were forced into selling 2 of our most promising young players to Premier League rivals just to kind of keep Richard Masters and the Premier League cartel happy. That was always a bit shit. Let's be fair. If you look at it though, what we got for Minteh, based on, a £7 million purchase, a loan deal in the Farmers League that is the Eredivisie, or whatever it's pronounced, didn't exactly set the world on fire. The Feyenoord fan that we had on the podcast was essentially saying, look, he looks okay in spurts. He goes missing for portions of the game. Yeah. He is less likely to play a rigid formation. He's not disciplined enough for all of that. And it's kind of what we're seeing when he's been playing for Brighton. And, I made a point on a podcast a few weeks ago maybe 2 weeks ago or whatever, before the international break, where fans need to stop overanalyzing minor incidents and making it out to be that, well, that's what's happened for the entire 90 minutes in the game. And Minteh is kind of like this prime example of that. Yes, he scored a goal last week. Yes, he's had an assist. Yes, he's had a couple of flashes. But overall, he's not showcasing what all the fans are on about. He's not proving us to be, oh, you know what, we've just sold the next Messi. It's like, look, he's young, he's got potential, he may still develop into a top class player, but there's every chance, based on what we're seeing, in that he's probably going to be a good Premier League player. and contribute regularly, but I don't think he's going to be like the next Mo Salah or, he's not going to set the Premier League alight. But there is time. So it's going to take time to see.
To be fair, he's very young.
He's very young. He's very raw.
Start of his English adventure.
Yep. Yeah.
Obviously, a lot more players don't make it than do. That's just the nature of the beast. But he's shown enough flashes to suggest that if he stays in the game and he gets the right kind of coaching and all the rest of it, that he could have a lot to offer this game. Whether it's in England, whether he moves on somewhere else, who
100%.
knows?
I think he's got enough in his game to be a Premier League player, but I think the hype around him from our and as we keep saying, it's like the fans that are constantly bitching and moaning, it's like we didn't get offers for Miggy, we didn't get offers for Murphy, we didn't get offers for all these other players that they seem to want to sell, to have sold in priority. It's like, yeah, great. If we got a £30 million offer in for Murphy, yeah, you take it every day of the week and you keep your promising talent. We didn't get that, So selling Murphy and Anderson was basically stopping us losing Bruno or Gordon or someone like that. So take it on the chin. He hasn't exactly set the Premier League alight with like 20 goals so far this season. He's a good player with plenty of potential, but he's off on the hype. Don't go absolutely nuts every time he does one thing in a game. Just take it as it comes. We're worried about Newcastle United now. I don't give a crap about Yankuba Minteh anymore when he's playing against us. I hope we beat them. I hope he goes on to have a good career. I really do. But I'm not going to lose my mind if we don't. If he plays well and it's not for us.
He's going to get booed, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's going to boo every touch.
Potentially, and guaranteed if we do that, he's going to score. So
he's done nothing wrong, but he gets booed.
Yeah.
Just on the point of him being sold, in his presser, Howe said that it was actually exactly the right thing to do because we just could not accept or risk even getting that 10 point or whatever it might have been deduction. Yeah. We just couldn't do that. Obviously, our intention is to be at the top. And we want to get into Europe, as you said, and we should have been in Europe. Thank you very much, Man United. God damn it. Yeah. But he said it was the right decision. But
if we didn't sell Minteh, we're literally sitting on 2 points right now.
Sure. And you said Minteh was exactly the kind of player that we need. Exactly. All his stats, all his numbers were exactly right. Brighton, if you remember when they signed him, said like he's really just like he's exceptional for all the sort of the markers that we look for in the stats. And obviously we'd done our homework in the first place to sign him. But he was the right decision to sell him. But he would have been involved probably this season, according to Eddie Howe. He would have been involved had things have turned out differently. Yeah. But they didn't. He's at Brighton now. He'll probably get booed. He'll probably score the winner. Fucking Christ. And we'll never hear the bloody end of it, will we? Anyway, let's move on from the game. Let's not move on from the game. Let's move on from the teams and let's talk about what we think the prediction will be for the score, and we'll just wrap it up here. So I'll let you go first. What do you think the score will be?
I've said 2-1 to Newcastle. I think it'll be a tight affair, but I'm hoping that the home crowd and, as I said, if the crowd get up for booing Minteh and the hype gets around that sort of stuff, I'm hoping that we can do the business. I'm sure the players will be up for it, but I'm praying that we start to find a bit of form going forward because we've looked disjointed so far this season. Defensively, I think we'll have enough, and I think if Brighton play their usual high line, I think we'll be able to exploit that, but I do still think it's going to be a tight affair. So, 2-1 to us, but fingers crossed.
I will echo that. I think we'll be 2-1 as well. Brighton's high line means we should be able to get behind them. Whether or not we can actually put that away remains to be seen, but the fact that Isak is back has got to be a massive bonus to us. So I'm going to go for 2-1
create
as well.
chances for the guy and you'll score.
Sure, exactly. But if you put Gordon down the left, there's every chance that's going to happen. It's tight though. It's one of those teams where you just little bits, little details here and there, and it can be a completely different result on the day. But we'll leave it there. So both of us gone for 2-1. We did a little poll in our Telegram chat, by the way. If you want to join, click the link in the description. And the majority was a minority. Minority. The majority vote went to a very slim win. So we'll have to remain seen. So kind of confident, but it's going to be tight. Could be a draw, could be a loss. It's in the balance. All right, Mark, we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining me tonight. Thanks to everybody who's watched and listened. And we will see you for the next one, which will hopefully be a review of Newcastle pounding Brighton into the ground. How are the tune?
Take it easy.